Hi, I'm Femi OK. Today on the stream, should real-life events be used in video games? How you react to that question will really influence how you watch today's show. We are going to be looking at a controversial video game that's based on a very controversial war. Take a look at 6 Days in Fallujah.
It was a well-prepared city, buttressed, waiting for us to come.
The only way you can clear a city is you have to search every house, you have to search every room, and you have to root out every insurgent.
A third of my battalion was killed or wounded.
It was the bunkers they would build inside houses. And you would go in the house, it'd be all quiet, and then they would open up on you or shoot you through a hole in the wall.
You kick down that door, and there's a sense of relief. You only feel it if you survive.
So that game, 6 Days in Fallujah, was originally due to be released in 2009. The criticism shut it down. It is back this year, currently being developed. But should it be? Your thoughts? YouTube awaits you. Jump into the comments section and you can talk to our guests. Let's say hello to the guests. Hello to Yassine, hello to Rami, hello to Rebecca. Yassine, tell everybody who you are, what you do. Welcome to the stream.
Thank you for having us. My name is Yassine. I'm commonly known as Narsi. I'm the founder of Iraqi, and we are the medium based out of Montreal, Canada, and I am a proud Iraqi.
Good to have you. Rami, welcome to the stream. Tell everybody who you are, what you do.
Hi, I'm Rami Aswain. I'm a half Dutch, half Egyptian game developer. I'm also an industry ambassador who focuses on underrepresented viewpoints and marginalized people.
Nice to have you. Hello, Rebecca. Tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Valentine. I'm a video game journalist, a reporter currently working with IGN with a background in specifically business journalism and how games get made.
Good to have you. All right, let's start this debate. It is a debate immediately. Yassine, you were watching that trailer and you were shaking your head. Why?
I mean, for the last 20 years of my life, but let's say for the last 30 years in the gaming industry, games about Iraq have come out and dehumanized the life and commodified Iraqi death. And this was just, the sort of the tip of the iceberg for me to be in the position that I'm in and to have access to social media, a group of friends of mine in the Iraqi community who are also creatives and gamers. I'm not in the gaming industry, I'm more in the music and film industry. We came together to start a petition against this game coming out. As you mentioned, it was canceled before for the similar reasons. And there are games that are based on the parody of reality, or games that are based on artificial cities. But this game itself is based on a true conflict that occurred in the world, and people died due to it. Many, many families were displaced due to it, as well as soldiers that came back from it with incredible levels of PTSD. So this is not a game. Our hashtag is Iraq is not a video game. This shouldn't exist. And it shouldn't be something that people play to trivialize a real-life event. It's a toxic imperialist perspective that has continued and been present in media for as long as I've lived, and we've had enough. Enough is enough.
What I think is really striking about this game, and I think a reason that a lot of people see it as different, is that everything Yassine said is true, right? So far, the games industry at large has had I don't want to call it respect, but the decency to at least create this fictional Arab country. And it's this mix of stereotypes, this mix of a dehumanization where they can't even set the games in the real countries. But in a way, when you're talking about something as traumatic and as devastating as war, this fake, we call it Arabistan, like in the industry, is actually sort of a boon, because at least it's not, even though it's dehumanizing, even though it's offensive, it's not directly touching any real people that died, right? The 6 Days in Fallujah very explicitly says this is about a real city. And then they say that the marketing is really, we're going to talk about the history of this conflict, right? That's what they're saying. The reality is they're not doing that. It's the same old game. It's about American heroes going to an Arab country and bringing freedom and liberty, and then talking about how sad it made their soldiers.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the website. Rebecca, I'm going to come straight to you, but this is what the website, so everybody can follow along at home, 6days.com. 6 Days in Fallujah is a video game about the real experiences of Marines, soldiers and Iraqi civilians who fought al-Qaeda during the second Battle of Fallujah in 2004. And look at this. This is interesting. When we originally announced 6 Days in Fallujah in 2009, we learned that some people believe video games shouldn't tackle real-life events. To these people, video games seem more like toys than a medium capable of communicating something insightful. We disagree. Yassine, I hear you. I hear you. You're arguing with the website.
I disagree.
Yes.
Because, again, this game is told from the perspective of the occupier. It's told from the perspective of the oppressor.
Right.
It's not, when you're going to see Iraqis in this game, I can almost guarantee you the Iraqis in this game are going to be translators that run around like pets to the American soldiers and tell them where the people are hidden in order for them to get them. There's no empowerment of Iraqis in this game or a positive representation of Iraqis. It's not in the trailer. It's not going to be in the game. And this is just another selling point for them. And I totally disagree. I don't think...
Gents, let me let Rebecca to get into this, because Rebecca, this is something that you've been covering, this controversy, and the fact that the game came back almost like it's a phoenix life, risen from the ashes. How did that happen?
Right. There's a lot to unpack there. And I think Yassine and Rami definitely have it. So that, as you said, I have been reporting on this. I've spoken to various folks who are part of the Arab game dev community, folks with various ties to Fallujah, whether it's through family or culture or, anything else. And yeah, kind of a common criticism and concern from those people is that this is specifically being told from a very explicitly U.S. militaristic perspective. And that criticism stems from the fact that when this game was first announced back in 2009, it was being developed by a studio called Atomic Games. It was being published by Konami. And Atomic Games is being run by someone who... The concept behind this game came from people who were making simulators for the U.S. military training simulators. And it was inspired by ideas that, Marines that they were working with have. It has these connections to the U.S. military. And they have said, they have made public statements now that there is no connection. The U.S. government is not funding it in any way. But that is still where, regardless of whether that's true or not, that's still where the seed of the idea came from. And that was one really big criticism, is that, regardless, it's claiming to tell this what it says is a true story, an accurate representation of how things were in Fallujah. But, it's doing that while having, at its deepest roots, this tie to a government that, people are concerned has reasons to skew the story in a very specific way.
And I think it's not just that. It's also, in terms of what the game is doing, it's doing nothing new, right? It's a game about U.S. soldiers going into a country and shooting things, only this time it's real. Like the first time the game was canceled, you have to imagine, this game wasn't necessarily canceled by Arabs who had a voice. We didn't have a voice back then. We don't have a voice back now. We don't have a voice right now, right? What Yassine is doing is the largest opposition we can muster to this game. The reality is that the game was canceled because the veterans opposed to it, right?
Yes.
The game was canceled because people that fought the war opposed it, not the people that were victims. They never get asked.
I think it's important. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I just wanted to supplement Rami's point really quick. It was canceled back then because Konami, the publisher, which is primarily a Japanese publisher, saw the opposition to the game and they pulled funding and they refused to publish it after the opposition. Now it is sort of arisen again with a new publisher that is run by the person who wanted to make the game in the first place.
Okay, yes. So I want to push us on because there's so much to talk about, and it's extraordinary that it's a video game that's got us talking about it. But here we are. This is Romano. Romano is talking about Fallujah as the basis for a video game. Yassine, respond off the back of this video comment.
When we talk about the war in Fallujah, we're talking about something that is very real and horrific. The dehumanisation of Muslims that confines us to an extremist narrative in mainstream media is nothing new, and consequently people have become immune and desensitised to killing, especially the killing of Muslims. Now, can video games show the true cost of human war? They absolutely can, because games by their very nature allow people to inhabit another person's subjectivity and empathise with their perspective. However, in the case of 6 Days in Fallujah, it's engendering sympathy with an event that resulted in the murder of innocent Iraqi civilians and was downright abhorrent. So we talk about the human cost of war, and yet we repeatedly find that it's trivialised and glorified through a narrow lens that whitewashes the atrocities that were committed.
Yassine, go ahead. At this point, I'm going to show a petition that you're very much involved in. Stop Highwire Games and Victoria from normalising the mass murder of Iraqis. Yassine, go ahead.
Yeah, let us not lie to ourselves and spin this into just being a video game. This stems from the lack of accountability for America's role in the war in Iraq, in an unjust war that was built on a lie, first of all, where over 1 million people died. That's one. Secondly, they released a trailer of this game on the week of the 18th anniversary of that invasion, and that's insult to injury. That's not a mistake. Let's not trick ourselves and think that's coincidence. There's no such thing as coincidence. So I'm sorry. They want to paint it however they want to paint it, and they want to spin it in the media, just as they've been trained. And just as Rebecca mentioned, you know, the lead dev and the head of Victoria Studios, who's Peter Tamte, was involved in the making of game design for soldiers to train for war. So don't tell me that the template wasn't there for him to create this game. It's all just, you know, they didn't even want to come on this show. So I'm going to call them what they are. They were cowards.
But we do have, they're not here on the show to debate with you, but they did send a statement. Rami,
that's great.
You can debate with this statement, all right. So I've got a little bit of a quote here. We're going to throw this up. And this is what Victoria are saying. While fewer than 15% of young people in Western nations are familiar with the battles for Fallujah, more than 150 million people played a military shooter last year. We believe video games are a powerful way to bring knowledge about important topics to many more people. That's what Victoria is saying. That's what they sent to us, to the stream. Rami, you say what?
Yeah. I'm a game developer, right? Like, I believe in the power of video games, and I believe in the power of video games to communicate very difficult topics. War has been tackled by a Polish game studio in This War of Mine, an incredible game about being a civilian in a war zone. German developers have made games like Spec Ops: The Line about the trauma of being an aggressor in a war. This is not that. What they're doing is they're not bringing knowledge. What they're doing is they're removing knowledge. It's historical revisionism. The fact that they say that this is a war against Al-Qaeda, while Al-Qaeda was just starting to appear in the city as a result, largely, of U.S. actions in the region, but that's left out. That's revisionism, leaving out war crimes because they couldn't find. They say they've interviewed these 26 Iraqis to get their perspective right, but they also say 26. That between these 26 Iraqis, they didn't find anybody who could tell them about war crimes, and that's why they're not in the game. How did you filter these Iraqis then? Because every Iraqi that I talked to that's from Fallujah can tell me about the things that happened, can tell me about the crimes that happened, that can tell me about the things, the awful things that happened in that city. And somehow this game randomly found 26 Iraqis that just know nothing about that? Haven't heard anything, right? That is not.
Also,
it seems like...
Yes, Rebecca.
Go ahead, Rebecca.
It seems like they seem to be preempting with this comment, and then also with the statement you showed on the website earlier. They seem to be preempting an argument that, oh well, as if people are saying that video games cannot portray serious events, or video games can't. They're toys. They can't be taken seriously. None of the people that I've spoken to are arguing that. You know, I spoke to game developers. I spoke to people who have worked on things that are very emotional and moving, and talk about real life experiences. What I understand people are asking is that, people who make these things do so, with consideration and care and responsibility for the subjects they are tackling. And the concern is that...
Rebecca, I want to put some of the YouTube comments to you then, because this conversation is split. People are watching you and Rami, Yassine, and they're split. They can't decide which way they fall on this debate. Let me put this to you. This is from Canny. Reenactments of real-life violence meant to be a form of entertainment should be reasonably banned. Rebecca, handle that one, just very briefly.
I mean, I think it's a challenging topic, right? I think it depends on who is making it and what they're making and what they're trying to say and how they're thinking about the issue. I think, I think, and the people that I spoke to, all pretty much universally said, Fallujah, the Second Battle of Fallujah is a recent event that has been that still has many people who are suffering from the after effects to this day, and it has already been the target of so much, as Rami said, revisionist history. And now we have a group of people with a clear stake in telling a very specific perspective on that story who are trying to turn it into a video game. And, if you criticize them, then you're saying video games are toys and can't tell serious stories.
So
And I don't
let
think
me
that's
bring
true.
in some more YouTube. Everybody wants to talk to all of you guests. Cryptomeria. I feel like games like this fuel racism. I feel very uncomfortable with this. Yassine.
I think it's beyond racism. It's the continuation of the American military-industrial complex. It's the demonization and the dehumanization of brown and black and Iraqi people. It all stems from the same place. It all stems from an imperialist conquest of the world. So at the end of the day, if you want to go that deep, we can get into colonization. But I think in this specific case, the reason we started this petition was because this didn't happen too long ago. There was no justifiable reason to enter Iraq in the first place. And for you to create a video game and profit off that death is an issue. At the end of the day, Peter Tamche and his team could say, they could say whatever they want. And he says, there's a quote from him where he says, "We're not asking players to commit atrocities in the game. Are we effectively sanitizing events by not doing that? As a matter of fact, you are sanitizing them by letting people control a real life event in a video game where civilians died while you were fighting your enemy." So,
Rabi, can I share this with you, because you're a game developer, and we spoke to another game developer about maybe the focus with a lot of these first shooter games and video games that are revolving around fighting and war. The focus is in the wrong place. It's very Western focus. This is what Malaf is suggesting. Let's have a look. Let's have a listen.
I think, quite frankly, that there's plenty of other shooters out there that kind of cover the soldier's story and do it quite well and to varying degrees. And I just feel that as a game player myself, as a games designer, I feel it's probably more important or more interesting, quite frankly, to tell the story of the people on the ground. What does war mean for a civilian, an innocent member of the human race who is just going out by their day and they're affected by war? To me, that's a much more interesting story to be explored. And it's a shame that the 6 Days in Fallujah does not appear to focus on that.
The thing you have to understand about 6 Days in Fallujah is that it didn't have to be this way. 6 Days in Fallujah could have been an incredible document of the war, showing the perspective of the people that the Americans that invaded the country, the civilians that lived in the city, the people that fought in the city. You could have that. You can make this a document that could show you the viewpoints and make you understand each of these sides of the story.
Who's doing that, Rami? Who's doing that in the game world?
So I mentioned this War of Mine, which is an incredible example of a game that is about the civilian side of war. And it shows very powerfully that you can absolutely tell that story. Now, by making this a first-person shooter only, then yeah, you can only represent the people with the guns. And then if you only represent the people of the guns, yeah, then you end up making a shooter. The question I have about this game is the entire marketing is sort of built around this one moment of 2 U.S. soldiers at a door, and they're going to open the door and they don't know what's behind the door. And Tamte has repeatedly referred to that as that sort of like the emotional crux of the game, that tension, to the point that they want to deliver that feeling so much that they are not actually depicting Fallujah in the game. No, they're putting Fallujah together like Lego blocks randomly. It's not the real city. These are not the real people. They've turned us into computer code that randomly shuffles us together and randomly shuffles. That's how important that U.S. perspective is to him.
Yeah.
What I wonder is, why don't we see the other side of that door? Because that's way more interesting to me.
And it's a feature. It's a feature of the game. It's called procedural architecture. So each time you replay it, it's like, oh, I've learnt the way through, but you haven't, because the architecture all changes and then it comes back again. Do you know, there's something that I'm thinking.
Meanwhile, they have scanned U.S. soldiers, like actual real people who were there directly, and put them and their actual true stories into the game. But if they have done that with Iraqis who were there. We have not yet seen it.
So that would be a much scarier game to play, right? You being a civilian,
the gameplay,
and you don't know if a Marine is going to come to your house. That would be terrifying.
The gameplay reveal trailer does have 2 Iraqi civilians at the end, very briefly, to make a single point in like less than a minute in a 6-minute trailer. And they have said that, you know, they include a scenario where you are fleeing the city as an Iraqi civilian as well. But again, when weighed against all of, you know, the over 100 U.S. soldiers who were interviewed and spoken to for this, and all of the other, you know, the very heavily skewed U.S. perspective. That's the big one, I think.
If I may add this point. Sorry, Rami. This was an illegal occupation of a country. It's not a video game. I dare Peter Tamte or Victoria or Microsoft or Sony PlayStation or Valve or Steam to address this, which they haven't. They have a responsibility now more than ever. The media that we create, that we put out into the world, that we consume, has a role in the way history is told and the way people are growing up in this world. If we want the world to... Yes.
Something occurs to me, and that is this game is not out yet. Right? And we have seen this before. People raving and they're enraged about something that hasn't been seen. We are basing this conversation on an ethical conversation. Should real-life events be used gamified, right? That's the ethical conversation, so we can have that conversation. But picking apart a game, I want to bring in Paul here, because Paul makes a point, and I'd love you to react to it, Rami, as the game developer. Let's go and play that clip.
Canceling 6 Days in Fallujah before it even releases is pretty stifling the discussion, purely because what you're looking at is a situation where people are calling to censor this game without understanding that the developers are claiming that the game is elevating voices of Iraqis. They've interviewed 26 Iraqi citizens who were living in the area during the conflict of Fallujah. So if we cancel this game before it releases, you're essentially creating an issue where you're not encouraging discussion around the topic. If the game comes out and it happens to be a misrepresentation of what happened in Iraq, then it deserves every bit of criticism it gets. But before it even releases is jumping the gun a little bit.
I'm sorry if I may.
No.
Go ahead, Rami. Go ahead.
All right. So 2 things, right? First thing, as a game developer, when you make a game, you have to start from a place. These are these incredibly complex things to make. This is not easy. You can't change course halfway through. What Peter Tamte says, what the focus of the game is, has been set for years. Games don't get developed in weeks. They don't shift direction in weeks. What's very clear is these 26 voices that they've interviewed clearly are filtered, right? Because otherwise these war crimes, these missteps, these atrocities would have been mentioned. The second thing is the censorship discussion, because I don't get that point. This game is intentionally censoring the real life experience of victims of war. People that have died, whose families have died, who've buried their families in a soccer stadium in the city. That's being censored by the United States of America, by a company with the largest media output in the world, with the loudest voice. We can't censor in America. There's no way for us to censor. How do we censor 6 Days in Fallujah? How is that possible when that entire game is censorship?
I have just one more. I have one more thought for you, and just you've got 30 seconds each, so it's a very quick thought. What should happen to this game, Rebecca?
I mean, I don't feel super comfortable, you know, answering for myself. I don't have nearly as much of a stake in this as so many other people do.
Rebecca, I would say, what should happen to it?
I would say that people who are in charge of making this game need to very seriously consider the criticisms that are being thrown at it.
Right, think about the criticisms. Let me move on. Rami, right at the end of the show, sorry to rush you. Rami, what should happen to this game in a sentence?
The game will come out. It will come out. There's nothing we can do. This should never happen again.
Yassine.
I don't buy it, and you shouldn't either.
Yassine, Rami, Rebecca, thank you so much for really explaining why 6 Days in Fallujah, currently being developed as a video game, is problematic. Thanks for watching, everybody. YouTubers, thanks for your comments. I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.